Hi there, and thank you for joining me. In this class, we're going to be going through a little bit of a yin flow, so expect to be holding the postures for anywhere between 2 to about 4 minutes. And the only thing that you're going to need for today's practice is a blanket. Just any blanket, it doesn't matter how big it is, how comfortable it is, as long as you have a blanket, just to prop up your hips in some of the positions and just to get a little bit more comfortable in some of them. It's not absolutely necessary, but it can make the experience a little bit softer and a little bit easier. But before we get into any of the postures, I want you to come into a comfortable seat, either on your knees, on your bum, just however you are, as long as you're comfortable. And just start to slow down the breath. Take a couple of big inhales. Release a couple of big exhales or sighs. And feel free to close down the eyes or even just soften the gaze down towards the floor. And just turn the attention inwards. So just taking stock of how you're feeling in this moment, how your day's been. Maybe you're acknowledging the rest of the day that you have ahead if you're doing this in the morning. But just taking stock. Getting a sense of how you are today. And just slowing things down. So just taking nice expansive breaths into the belly, into the sides of the ribs, breathing deeply and slowly. And of course, feel free to shrug the shoulders around, or move the back around, or move the spine in any way that feels like it needs to. Any part of the body, you can move your neck around as well, if it feels particularly stiff today. And then once you're done with any or all of your movement, just come back into a place of stillness. Return your awareness back to the breath, and just let it slowly and gradually deepen a tiny bit further. So lengthen the inhales a little bit more, lengthen the exhales a little bit more, and feel free to also just really over-exaggerate the exhales. Really deeply sigh, or just really elongate the exhales a little bit further. Just to help further bring us into a state of stillness and a state of space and restoration. And I want you to take a big inhale in, fill up the lungs as much as you possibly can, and then hold the breath right at the top. Suck in a tiny bit more air, and hold for 3, 2, 1, and release a big, big, long exhale through the nose. We're going to do that 2 more times. So fill up the lungs on an inhale, then pause, then suck in a tiny bit more air, pause for 3, 2, 1, and a slow, steady, silent exhale through the nose. Last time, bringing a big inhale in, pausing, sucking in a bit more, and pausing for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And a big exhale, or just a big, big sigh on this one. Take a full breath in after, and a full breath out. Perfect. Now we're going to move into our postures. So the first posture that we're going to come into is a half frog position. So we're going to come down to lie on our bellies here. Now this is where you might want a blanket as well. You might not need one, but you might want one as well. So essentially, the blanket is just going to come under your hips, just to get a little bit of a lift, and just make that a little bit more comfortable for the pelvis turning down onto the ground. Now we're going to start with our right leg. So just staying on your forearms just now, and bringing your right leg up towards your hip so that your knee is kind of in line with your hip and that your ankle is kind of in line with your knee at the same time. And if it doesn't get there, that's absolutely fine. It can be a little bit further away. We're looking for a little bit of a stretch through the insides of the hip and maybe even through the outside of the leg as well. Now you're welcome to stay on your forearms just for now. Maybe also feeling a little bit of a stretch or a little bit of compression in the low back. And if that's feeling like it's too much, you can bring your forearms a little bit further away so you're not as lifted up. And now I just want you to take some deep, slow, steady breaths. And just try and allow the body to relax. So within these positions, we don't necessarily want to be reaching or engaging or trying too hard. We want to be really passive within all of these positions, unless I'm telling you otherwise in some things or in some movements to engage something. But overall, we want to be nice and relaxed and keep the positions really nice and soft. So allow yourself to slouch a little bit further down into your shoulders. Allow your hips to sink as close to the ground as you possibly can. And you can even tuck the chin to the chest here as well. And just let the neck relax. And I just want you to gradually scan through the body and just notice if there's any areas where the body, maybe your glute starts to engage, or maybe the ankle starts to engage, or your toes even start to pull back, but just notice if there's a little part of your body, a little segment that starts to tense up or squeeze. And I just want you to consciously try and soften that. So maybe take a big inhale, release a big sigh, and then let it soften. Now you're welcome to stay on your forearms for the rest of this posture on this side, or you can make a little pillow for your head, and rest one side of your temple down on it. Once again, let your shoulders soften, let everything relax. And let your upper back start to soften here as well. Now I'm going to leave you in this space for another minute before we change sides. Try to breathe deeply into the low belly and just notice that expansion on the low back with each breath. Now before we change sides, I want you to take 2 full breaths. Make the exhales a little bit louder, a little bit longer, a little bit more exaggerated. And then when you're ready, slowly bring your legs back alongside each other, and then rest the chin down on your hands. Take a few breaths here, and just allow for your awareness to drift into that right leg, and noticing any tingling, rushing sensation, anything like that from the leg that was just bent. Then when you're ready, you're going to come back up to your forearms, and you're going to do the exact same thing on the left-hand side. So we don't need to move the blanket or anything like that, but just bringing the left leg up so that the knee is kind of in line with the hip and that the ankle is kind of in line with the knee. Once again, not stressing too much if it's a little bit further away or we're not getting that exactly right. As long as it feels okay and your hips and your low back are starting to sink down, then you're absolutely fine. Once again, remember that you can move your forearms a little bit further away if you feel like there's too much compression in your low back. And just like the other side, just allow yourself to try and settle into this position. Now, one side might feel drastically different to the other side. It might feel like there's so much more tension on one side compared to the other, which is totally normal, so don't stress about that. Just let your breath guide you a little bit deeper and a little bit softer with each one. Trying to keep everything as soft and as relaxed as possible. And just using the breath to just help encourage that. So nice big inhales, nice big exhales. And now you're welcome to stay up on your forearms or make a little pillow for your forehead, and then rest the other side of the temple down. Once again, making sure the shoulders are soft, the upper back starts to soften, and just breathing into that space in the low back. And I'm going to leave you here for another minute to 2 minutes, just like I've done on the other side. So just letting your awareness remain steady and effortless. Not worrying too much if your mind starts to drift off or get distracted. That's totally part of the process. And it's going to happen. So just gently guiding it back with either the breath or physical sensation that you can latch onto. Now I want you to take 2 more big breaths. Nice and spacious, and nice big long exhales. Then when you're ready, come back up to your forearms. Slowly bring both legs underneath you. And allow your shoulders to sink down. And just let your awareness drift to that left leg now. Once again, noticing any rushing, tingling, anything like that. And just taking a few breaths here before moving on. Now the next posture that we're going to move into, we're hardly even going to have to move to get into it. We're going to come into Sphinx pose. So coming maybe a little bit higher up onto the forearms here, maybe readjusting if you need to, just to bring everything nice and central, maybe on top of that blanket. And remember, you can take the blanket away if you don't want it there as well. Now I want you to be able to just gently push down through the elbows here. That's the only bit of activity that I want you to have. So we're going to be in this position for a couple of minutes, and then we're either going to stay in it or we can add on slightly. So your arms are nice and parallel. Maybe your elbows are a little bit further away from your shoulders. If you want to have a little bit more height, you would obviously bring them a little bit closer, so that maybe your shoulders are stacked on top of your elbows. Now once again, if you feel any compression in your low back, which isn't necessarily comfortable, have your hands a little bit further away, and that's just going to lessen that and create a little bit more space. There's no right or wrong of where your hand should be. I just want you to listen to your body and just adapt appropriately to how your body feels today. Okay. Now while you're here, this is a really nice place to get into some areas of the neck. So once again, only pushing down through the elbows ever so slightly, and then you can bring your right ear to your right shoulder, and then let's do some little half circles. So bringing the chin down towards the chest, and then the left ear to the left shoulder. And just moving in your own time, at your own pace. Just exploring all of these areas of the neck, and maybe pausing in any of the areas where your neck might feel quite stiff or quite sticky. And just breathing into that space as best as we can. Letting it soften and letting it stretch out. Now it's okay if your shoulders start to tremble a little bit here under the weight and under the pressure, under the tension. Just stick with it. We won't be here for too much longer, another 20 seconds or so. So if you're done with moving your neck around, you can just come back through center. And of course, you can just tuck the chin to the chest slightly, or just gaze ahead, almost like at a 45-degree angle. Once again, don't stress too much about the exacts. We're not going to be getting the protractors out and measuring where your eye gaze is going. Perfect. Now take one more big inhale. Release a nice big sigh. Now you're absolutely welcome to stay here. And there's 2 ways that we can add on here. So if you're feeling like there's a little bit more space is opened up, you can maybe bring your hands a little bit closer towards your belly so that shoulders are maybe starting to stack over the shoulders. Alternatively, you can turn your hands out ever so slightly. So the left hand faces left, right hand faces right. And then there's an option to come into seal pose here. So you could maybe start to push down through the hands and lift everything up, finding a little bit more extension through the spine. So there's a little bit more activity within this posture. I want everything else to be soft except the push that you're getting through your hands and the push that you're getting through your shoulders, okay? Try to let the shoulders sink down a little bit away from the ears. And we're not going to be in this position for an awful long time. I just want you to take 5 or 6 big breaths into the belly. Maybe some big long exhales as well. Trying to keep the legs soft and relaxed. Sticking with that tension through the shoulders and through the arms. And then when you're ready, you're going to slowly lower yourself down to your forearms. And then make a little pillow for your head again. Just rest your forehead down on your on the backs of your hands. Take a few deep breaths into the belly. Notice that expansion through the low back. And just allow your back to be neutral here. So just allow it to be flat and soft and relaxed. Perfect. When you take one more breath here, release a nice big sigh. And then bring your hands back underneath you. And we're just going to come up to our knees. So the next position that we're going to come into is child's pose. There's a couple of ways that we can use the blanket to help find a little bit more softness within this position. So alternatively, if you don't have the blanket, you don't need to use one. But there's 2 options that I'm going to provide for you. So you can either have the blanket underneath the tops of the shins, which I find is a really nice place for it to be. Alternatively, you can also have the blanket in between that space between your calves and your hamstrings. Okay, so wherever you have the blanket, I personally really like to have it. I'd actually really like to have it in both positions, to be perfectly honest. So if you have 2 blankets, that's absolutely fine. But I really like to have it a little bit of cushioning in between my calves and my hamstrings, and that just helps keep the blood flowing a little bit more through the knees, okay? So whatever position you have your blanket in, I want you to bring your knees out nice and wide, have the big toes together to touch, and then just start to slowly walk your hands a little bit further forward, maybe just coming down towards the forearms, or maybe finding enough space that your forehead starts to come down as well. Now we're going to be in this position for about 3 minutes, so all I want you to do is try and soften as much as you possibly can. So let your shoulders get into any space they need to get. You maybe bring your elbows out nice and wide and rest your forehead down. Maybe you can let your shoulders soften by having your hands forward, and maybe getting a bit more of a stretch into the armpits by having them forward. So just be wherever you feel like you can soften into. Now this might not be a position where you are able to soften into, so if you're having to sit with that tension, or maybe a little bit of intensity, I'm going to offer you a little breathing practice just to help soothe that. It's very simple, it's very straightforward. It's just an interrupted box breathing practice. So you would be inhaling for 4 seconds, holding the breath for 4 seconds on the inhale, then exhaling for 4 seconds. And that's it. You won't hold the breath at the bottom of the exhale. So if that's going to help you through this next 2 or 3 minutes, then feel free to utilize it. Just letting your awareness flow throughout the body if you're not using that breathing practice. And just noticing if there's any tension creeping into areas where it's maybe not needed. Maybe you're pushing down through the forearms a little bit when you don't need to. Maybe you're pushing down through the toes, or tensing the glutes, or the thighs, or the hamstrings. Or maybe even you're just clenching the jaw, or sort of frowning slightly. So just noticing any of these reactions and just trying to soften into it. And try and let your breath take up as much space as it possibly needs to within this posture. So let your breath be expansive. Let your body move with each inhale. Let your back and your ribs inflate, and let everything soften and relax on the exhale. We're going to take a couple more breaths here. And then when you're ready, and slowly start to walk the hands back towards you, and then sit back towards your heels. I'm going to spend a couple of breaths here, breathing in and out through the nose, breathing deeply into the belly, and just letting everything from the top half of the torso sink down into the heels and down into the hips. Take one last big inhale, fill up the lungs. And when you get right to the top, hold the breath for a second. Breathe in a little bit more. Hold the breath for 3, 2, 1. Big sigh. All the way out. Do that one more time. Inhale, inflate the lungs as much as you possibly can. Then pause. Suck in one last little bit of air. Pause for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Big sigh. All the way out. Now we're going to swing our legs around, so gently come up onto the knees, and if you need to, this is a nice space to maybe bring the hands down, and the knees back underneath you, and just tuck and untuck the toes just to get some blood flowing into the tops of the ankles and into the feet again. And then when you're ready, we'll swing around into a seated position. So the next position that we're going to come into is Janu Shasana. So you're welcome to use the blanket for this pose as well. Fold it up, maybe fold it up again, so you kind of got just something like a block, almost like a wedge that you can put underneath your thigh. So we're going to start with the left leg out nice and long, then the right sole of the right foot anywhere on the leg, okay? So it might be closer down towards the ankle, it might be quite close in towards the groin, and then we're going to take that blanket if you have one. Alternatively, if you don't have one, don't worry too much. As long as you're not getting any tension through the knee, you're totally fine, okay? So if you do have your blanket, either bringing it underneath the knee or a little bit closer in towards the thigh and in towards the glute. Then I want you to lift up out the waist. Once again, everything on the bottom half nice and soft, nice and relaxed. But lift up out the waist as high as you can, and then start to reach as far forward as you can. Now once again, we're not like pulling or using anything to get any further, but just using the torso to reach forward and then round. And just letting the hands rest wherever they get to. Now allow the neck and the head to relax so the chin comes a little bit closer towards your chest. And just be aware of any sneaky tension working its way into that left thigh, maybe even into the right thigh as well, and into the hip. I'll be here for 2 minutes in total, so just try to be soft and relaxed here. Beware of any tension that might creep into the shoulders. And even after a couple of breaths, you might find there's a little bit more space to wiggle the hands a little bit further forward and maybe just round down a little bit more. Just another 3 deep breaths here. Let your body move with each one. Let it inflate and deflate. Expand and then soften. And then when you're ready, slowly peel yourself all the way back up. And before we move on to the other side, we're going to come into a little bit of a twist. So the left hand is going to come to the outside of the right knee. The right hand is going to come behind. I want you to lift up and then just gently twist open towards the right. It doesn't have to be anything big. The hands are just here for support, to hold us in the position. I don't want you to be reaching and twisting and trying to get as far around as possible. I just want you to be gently twisting open to the right. Trying to keep the legs relaxed, the hands relaxed, only here for support. If you want to, you can gaze over the right shoulder or just keep your chin in line with the center of your chest. Now we're going to take 5 breaths here. And when you're ready, come back through center. Pull the blanket out if it was there from underneath your right leg, and then we're just going to swap sides. So the right leg will extend, the sole of the left foot will come in towards anywhere on the right leg, down towards the ankle or the thigh, just like we've done on the other side. Then if you have your blanket, just pop it underneath your left knee or in towards the glute, just wherever you find more comfortable. Once again, on this side, legs nice and soft. Then I want you to lift up out the waist, gently turn towards the extended leg, the right leg, and then reach your hands forward and start to fold down. Remember to be gentle here. We're not trying to reach or pull ourselves any deeper than we can get. We're just allowing ourselves to soften just around. Something that might be very different from how we normally come into this posture. Something that might be quite comfortable is bringing your hands a little bit wider so your shoulder blades can sort of soften down towards the ribs instead of feeling like they're really tight and squeezing in towards each other. Just helping soften the upper back a little bit more and just helping to further create a bit more space through the spine. Remember, after a couple of breaths, there's maybe a little bit more space, so of course, you can maybe wiggle the hands a bit further and round a bit more. Take 2 more big breaths wherever you are. And then slowly start to peel yourself up. Now we're going to come into the same twist that we've done on the other side. This time, bring your right hand to the outside of the left knee. Left hand's going to come behind. Lift up out the waist and then gently twist open towards the left. Chin in line with the center of the chest, or you can gaze over the left shoulder if you would like to. Once you've settled, I want you to take 5 breaths here. Make them big, make them expansive. Once again, arms are only here for support. We're not trying to pull any deeper or further. And then we're going to slowly come back through center. Stretch both legs out in front of you. And I want you to have a little bit of space in between your front legs here. So almost like you're in a wide-legged forward fold, but not necessarily too much. And you're going to take the blanket, if you're using it, and just sit on top of it, just to get a little bit of height for the hips. And once again, legs not as wide as you can possibly get them, maybe just off the sides of the mat if you're using one. And I just want you to lift up out the waist and just use your hands. So on each inhale, lift everything up. Then on each exhale, maybe wiggle the hands a tiny bit further. Inhale, lift everything up. Exhale, wiggle the hands a bit further. And just continue to do so. Let your legs remain soft, so let the ankles and the feet drop out towards the sides and let the hips sort of roll open here to create a bit of space. And if you need to adjust the legs as you fold forward, that's absolutely fine. The knees can of course be a little bit bent as well. So inhales, lift everything up. Exhales come a bit further forward. Now I just want you to keep doing this until you reach that sort of invisible wall where you're not going to get any further. And you're maybe getting into that edge of discomfort. And then if you find that, I want you to come back from it slightly. We're not exactly trying to get our bellies right down towards the ground here. We're just trying to allow ourselves to find a bit of lift and a bit of space from the spine away from the hips. And letting everything soften. So if you get to that point where your legs feel like they kind of want to squeeze in and then your thighs want to sort of activate and engage, then come back a little bit. You might be able to find a space where your forearms can come quite comfortably down towards the ground. But of course your hands don't have to be on the inside. You can maybe even just rest your arms on your legs, just to take a little bit of that tension away. Now we're not going to be here for 4, 5, 6 minutes at all. We're just going to take another few breaths here. And then when you're ready, you're going to slowly start to peel yourself all the way back up. Then we're going to take another twist on both sides. So this time, left hand to the outside of the right knee, lift up out the waist, gently twist open towards the right. I want you to take one full breath in here, one full exhale, and then come back through center and swap sides. So right hand to the outside of the left knee, left hand behind, lift up and then twist open. Take one full breath in here, and one full breath out. Then come back through center. And the last pose that we're going to come into is Baddha Konasana. So you can either use the blanket to sit up on and lift the hips up, just to get a bit of space, or alternatively, you can unfold it a little bit and then place your ankles down on top, just to get a little bit of a lift and also just for a little bit of softness so your ankle bones aren't prodding down in towards the mat. Now within this pose, I don't want you to have your ankles as close, or your feet, as close in towards you as you possibly can. I actually want you to have them quite far away. So you've almost got a big diamond shape as opposed to your traditional butterfly posture. And then I want you to lift up out the waist and just similarly allow yourself the time to start to soften going forward. So feel free to move the shoulders around, the back around, shrug the shoulders, move the spine from side to side. Get rid of any last little bits of tension before you start to soften down. Your hands can be anywhere, they can be down so that your elbows are on the ground in between your legs. You can have them on the outside, you can even just use your legs for a bit of support here. We'll be in this position for about 3 minutes in total before we come down to our Shavasana. Now while we're in this position, I want you to really breathe deeply into the belly. Notice all of that expansion through the low back, and just know that with every deep breath that you're taking, the spine's decompressing a little bit more, the tissues are getting a little bit more of a stretch. It's just further helping to find a little bit more space. And just use this final posture to allow your breath to just naturally and organically start to deepen, lengthening out. Don't feel like you need to stay completely still here, completely rigid. Of course, feel free to move. If there's any spaces that need to be wiggled into or out of, then explore that. Let yourself soften. I'll take a few more breaths here. Breathing into all of that space on the back of the body. And then slowly, slowly, slowly start to peel your back all the way back up. Sit up tall, take a few breaths, and just let everything sink. So don't worry about being really ramrod straight with the back, just allow everything to round slightly. And maybe let the pelvis sort of just settle and soften. And just take a few breaths here. Notice any of the sensations through the back, rushing, tingling, stretching, release, anything at all. Then when you're ready, and only when you're ready, feel free to take as much time here as we want. We're going to come down to Shavasana. Now, you can use your blanket, of course, just to prop your head up a little bit, just to get a little bit of a nice bit of soft positioning for your neck. Just to prop it up slightly. And of course, you can adjust it as much as you possibly need to, just to get every last little bit of yourself nice and soft and nice and relaxed. And then when you come down to the ground, we're going to finish or settle into Shavasana the same way that we started the practice. So taking a big inhale in, holding the breath at the top for a second, taking in a little bit more, and pausing for 3, 2, 1, releasing a nice big, long, slow exhale through the nose. Do that 2 more times. Inhale, fill up the lungs. Pause at the top. Suck in a tiny bit more air. And pause. Big exhale. And then on this last one, do it in your own time at your own pace and release a nice big audible sigh. And of course, feel free to soften down the eyes or maybe even close them down. And just allow your body to be neutral. So get rid of any last wiggles, anything that's going to make you that tiny bit more comfortable, tiny bit more ease. Feel free to explore it. And just let your body start to soften. Relax the muscles of your face, your shoulders, your back and your arms. And then let that travel down, all the way down through the hips, through the legs, the knees, right down into the tips of the feet. And then just allow the whole of the body to soften and to relax. Allow your body a chance to absorb the practice that you've been through. Allow your mind a chance to rest and be effortless, possibly for the first time since this morning, since you got up out of bed. So just allow yourself to be at ease and to reconnect to your center. And this is the place where I'm going to leave you. So feel free to spend as much time in this position as you feel like you want to. Thank you so much for practicing with me. I hope to see you again soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day.